Howdy. Today, my colleagues and I will be discussing the research data lifecycle, data management planning, data repositories, and data publishing and impact, as well as providing resources, mainly from the libraries, that can assist researchers with their research data. I'm Atiana Uriri, the Data Planning and Presentation Librarian from the libraries, and I will be beginning our discussion with a comprehensive view of the research data lifecycle. Here's an overview of what I will be covering in this presentation. What is the data lifecycle? Why the lifecycle is helpful in research data management, and stages of the lifecycle. Let's start with what is the data lifecycle. A data lifecycle illustrates how data, in all its various forms and derivatives, including data points, data sets, databases, data files, visualizations, and code, conceptually flows through its lifecycle of usefulness. While data lifecycles are helpful frameworks to discuss appropriate actions taken at different stages, it is important to remember that for most data, the path is not linear, and some actions may not occur at all. As you can see, there are many ways to illustrate the actions taken at different stages, but the point of the diagrams and the stages of the life cycle is to guide researchers in managing the data that are created and used during their research. We will discuss stages that researchers regularly participate in during the research process: planning, collecting, processing, analyzing, sharing, and archiving. Knowing what the data lifecycle is, we can focus on its role in research data management. There are benefits to having a plan or idea of how your research data should be managed, including identifying the resources and services that provide research support, finding and understanding data when needed, and complying with funder and institutional requirements. As we discuss the stages of the research data lifecycle, we will break it down into the activities you are likely to do during different parts of the research process. In the planning stage, researchers will work to create several plans that establish a foundation for the research project. Plans for the overall project, who will be responsible for the different components of the project, roles and responsibilities, and how data will be organized and stored, for example. Researchers should familiarize themselves with the requirements of funders and TAMU policies, identifying relevant internal and external stakeholders like the Division of Research, libraries, etc., can expedite the planning process and ensure that researchers are in compliance with requirements. You will need to create a data management plan during this stage. The libraries has a research guide that provides resources for this stage, including sample text and instructions on creating a data management plan in DMP tool. Diana will give you a walkthrough of DMP tool in the next section. The active stages of the project start with the collecting stage, when data are gathered. To assist in useful data management, data collected must be properly organized, formatted, and documented. Clear and concise file names, stable data formats, the inclusion of metadata, and codebooks are examples of actions that are taken during the collecting stage. By taking actions in this stage that are applicable to your research data, you are providing future seekers and users of your data with data that are fair, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. We will hear more about the FAIR principles from both Laura and Jaden later. Processing denotes actions or steps performed on data to verify, organize, transform, integrate, and extract data in an appropriate output form for subsequent use. Data cleaning or wrangling is a well-known and regular action that happens during the processing stage. With processing data, you are working towards ensuring that your data is safe, authentic, and usable. Data analysis is critical in understanding the why or the questions of your research and may provide you and others insight on making decisions or creating or adopting policies. Many common tools or software in data analysis are R and Python, mainly the libraries Tidyverse, Plotly, Pandas, and NumPy, as well as OpenRefine and Tableau. Nearing the end of the life cycle, sharing, including publishing and reuse of data, requires both solid documentation processes, as discussed in the collecting step, and having an idea or understanding of what will happen to your data outside of publication. We'll discuss some questions to consider in the next slide. Depending on the type or types of data, research subject matter, funder requirements, and other factors, what and how you share will vary project to project. Again, there are resources and campus support available to navigate how to best answer these and other related questions. I've included links to resources that may help with answering questions. During the archiving step, data is deposited into a data archive or repository with the goal of long-term preservation. The deposit site may be the same as the site from the sharing and publishing stage, or can be an archive or repository that is better suited for long-term because of stability, data size, or discipline. The documentation and metadata work done in the beginning stages of the life cycle are also included in archiving data, as it provides context, especially when other researchers find your data before the other research outputs, or if they only interact with the data. The background of the data creation or collection, methods and tools used for data, and an inventory of what data are available would be types of documentation included when archiving data. In Laura's section on data repositories, we'll learn more about things to consider when choosing a repository. Circling back to the beginning of the presentation where we looked at the different life cycle diagrams, there are additional phases or stages that are under the umbrella of the major stages discussed, or are separate stages that may be handled by a person or department that isn't the researcher or their group. These stages may also not be necessary in the context of your research data. It is important to consider how to future-proof your data. Where will your data live after the completion of the research? Who will have access? If the format or formats used to save data in the present will be the best format in the future. In summary, good practices will make it easier to identify your workflow and the decisions you've made during your research. When the data lifecycle, both in the description of stages and diagrams, are a useful tool in research data management, the process is not linear, and there may be stages that are not applicable to your data management process. Reaching out to relevant parties, colleagues, and college and departmental support, the Division of Research support, and data services at the university libraries, and IT can help you navigate research data management and provide resources to support the process before, during, and after. And here are some references that I've included.
Okay, thank you so much, Atiana. Now we're going to transition to talking about data management plans and DMP tool. My name is Diana Morganti. So I'm going to cover 3 topics: why data management is important, what a data management plan entails, which will be a little bit longer, and how to create one using DMP tool. But first, why is data management important? Data management is a set of practices that ensures, importantly, compliance for grant requirements. We'll talk more about that later. Almost all funders require a data management plan, so you can prove that you'll be using good practices for data management. And that's because good data management practices ensure research integrity and reproducibility. Lastly, you want, and your funders want, for your research to both be efficient and accurate. If you design your data management practices ahead of time, you can reduce time spent doing tidying or cleanup later. So, what's a data management plan? First, we need to get on the same page about what data is. Research data is recorded, factual material commonly accepted in the scientific community as necessary to validate findings. We typically think of raw data only, such as responses to surveys, for example, but we also need to include the questionnaire that we use to get to those survey responses, if we consider what's necessary to validate findings. And we also need to include our codebook, what each of the codes in our data or analysis mean if we consider what's necessary to validate findings. And since individuals may interpret especially qualitative information differently from each other, interview notes might also be necessary. Research data can come in many forms then, not just raw data. They might be Word docs, models or algorithms, lab notebooks, audio-video files, or even the content analysis that you performed. Research data that is required to validate research findings is so much more than just the table of information. And data management planning must include plans for managing all the types of data that others need to validate your findings, not just those findings themselves. We'll come back to that later. So that was data, but what is data management? Managing data is about handling research data effectively and appropriately throughout the life of a research project and beyond. Research data management refers to all aspects of creating, storing, sharing, and archiving data, and is an essential aspect of conducting responsible research. If we go back then to one of Atiana's images of the data lifecycle, you can imagine that a large portion of data management planning happens in the plan portion before data collection begins anyway, if you're going to meet those goals. And that's why a full data management plan is required by pretty much all funders. We'll talk about that more. The content of a data management plan, though, includes all the activities that you will undertake in the rest of the lifecycle. Before we wrap up this section of the presentation, let's briefly discuss the components of a basic data management plan. There are 5 general types of questions that you'll answer, all determined by your funder, but they all fit under these 5 general headings. 1, describing the research data. These types of questions ask you to give a brief description of the data, outline and justify your choice of format, and consider the implications of your data format and the volume of your data in terms of storage, backup, and access. Don't forget that this is the expansive definition of research data, everything needed to validate your findings. So the data that you will answer about here includes things like not just the survey results, but also the questionnaire, etc. So let me show you an example. A common way to answer questions under this heading is through a table of information about our data. Let's pretend we're studying the effectiveness of offering data management workshops like this. We'll pretend we're doing a project where we design, implement, and study the effectiveness of a data management workshop. Look along the top here. I have my data types, a brief description of the data, potential size of data files, file format, and other necessary information. And then along the left, you can see the data types. I'm going to have the PowerPoint file of this presentation, the audio file that you're listening to now, the survey that we may give our students afterwards, and their responses. So here you can see my data types are more than just the survey responses. It's everything that somebody would need to replicate our work. Just for a sample of what it looks like, we'll take the PowerPoint file as an example. My description here is given, a PowerPoint file used for instruction originally created by Zhihong Xu. Since this is already created, I can actually give you the exact file size. The file format given here is PDF, and if we think of those implications, we need to realize that PDF is not an editable format for presentations. If I wanted others to be able to build on this, we would want it in a different format. But the last column explains that with other necessary information. This is not going to be available for reuse. We are just providing the PowerPoint file for information, and that is because of licensing information. You'd fill in this table for all potential data created in your project and required for others to validate your findings. The second general category of questions falls under data standards and metadata. That is, information about the data that you'll be gathering. If you did a thorough job in answering the first set of questions, you actually may have already hit some of these. Because the purpose here is to describe the types of documentation that will accompany the data in order to help other people understand and reuse it. You may have included that as part of the data that you'll be using. Consider how you'll capture this information, where it'll be recorded, and wherever possible, identify and use existing community standards. For a very easy to understand example, imagine if you are recording weight and you record weight in pounds. If you wanted to compare it to a survey or information from another research study, but they used kilograms, the standards that you use conflict. And so you want to identify those early on. And that would be in accordance with the goals that you have. Often when I'm working on this second type of question, it may feel natural to do just another similar table as the prior one. I recommend you don't combine the tables into one question and merely say something like answered in the previous question. You should always give your reader, especially if you're trying to get them to give you money, a gift of something that's easy to read. A second table is not too hard for you to create, and it'll really help the readers of your data management plan understand what you're doing. All right, and as an example of standards, again, you can see that for my PowerPoint file, I've noted that I'm going to follow WCAG accessibility standards. For attendance information, I'll be following FERPA. And these are important things for my funder to know. These standards both happen to be regulations, but the heading of standards here could be expanded to include standard protocols for measurement, standard policies for handling data, or any other standard method or design for your data. For documentation and metadata, you'll need to include anything necessary for folks to know how to use, reuse, or validate your data. The third general category of questions in a data management plan is information about storage and access. This is both during and after the project. You want to consider where data will be stored and how you'll control access to the data. Consider where, how, and to whom data that has acknowledged long-term value should be made available. I recommend actual statements here that begin with, during the project, data will be secured and stored on, XYZ, following data security policy, whatever you're going to be following for your project. And then you can see my second statement, after project completion, all instructional material, audio recordings, and pseudonymized student data listed in Table 2, right? All of the data that we talked about earlier will be shared in the Texas Data Repository within 6 months of completion. By the way, funders almost always ask for a timeline for sharing. They want to know when you will be sharing that data. Fourth, related to sharing data is intellectual property and reuse of any data that you share. Consider how the data may be reused. Decide which data to keep and for how long. Remember to consider any additional effort required to prepare the data for sharing and preservation, such as changing file formats or even cleaning sensitive data. Keep in mind, not all data can be shared and not all data should be shared. The Texas A&M University Libraries has a great workshop on sensitive data, and so you can check that out. We offer it at least once a semester. The last type of question that you're going to see in a basic data management plan are the actual mechanics of sharing your data through publishing data and preservation. Consider how data sets that do have long-term value will be preserved and curated beyond the lifetime of the grant. Outline the plans for preparing and documenting data for sharing and archiving. So as an example here, the preservation plan here is a combination of the actual preservation policy of the repository I'm using after I've compared it with my institution and my funder's requirements for preservation. Most of the time, they'll line up well. Data repositories are designed to help you fulfill those requirements. The data collected on employee motivation will be published at the Texas Data Repository, et cetera, et cetera. Preparing data here must also involve any efforts that you are going to undertake for cleaning sensitive data. Again, see that previous slide where we talked about some existing workshops if you need help learning more about that. Back to the overall agenda, though, my last point is that I want to show you all a tool for creating good data management plans. It's called the DMP tool. It's an online platform guiding DMP development according to the requirements of specific funding agencies. A&M researchers log in with your net ID. DMP tool facilitates the creation of machine-actionable DMPs, which are now required by some funders. That means that they interface with the funders and our university, allowing for online submission. That online submission means that it's easy for you to update your data management plan when your results are published. That's great for you, and it's great for the university. And lastly, it also allows for auditing to be sure that researchers fulfill their obligations for open publishing, and that's good for the funder. DMP tool is at dmptool.org. It's the nationwide standard for interface for building a DMP for a grant application, but you don't have to do it specific to a grant application. You can go in and say that you're not actually applying for a grant, you just want help creating a data management plan. You'll click login at the top and just use your Texas A&M University email to log in. Creating a plan is easy. You can even go create a mock plan for practice if you like. After you do so, you're going to fill out information about the name of the project and the funder that you're applying for, and that's where you can say that you're not applying for a funder if you just want to create a mock plan. But once you fill out those project details in the first tab, the second tab allows you to add both contributors. These are going to be co-authors of your final research project, as well as collaborators. Collaborators are anyone that you want to help you write or edit your data management plan. They may not be actual contributors or co-authors to your broader research project. When you launch a project, it asks what grant you're applying for, as I mentioned, and if none, it'll just give you the standard questions under the headings we just discussed. If you choose a funder, it'll give you their specific headings, though. Guidance for answering the questions are available inside of each question, and here you can see there are 3 tabs of guidance. DCC is guidance from the Data Curation Center, and you can see below the type of guidance that you're going to get from them. They're just going to be more detailed about what this question means. Texas A&M University, TAMU, this is guidance from TAMU, specifically if you're going to be using our data repository, which you'll hear more about in a moment. And then DMP tool, this is guidance from the tool itself. You may also see guidance from your funder in this same location. Not every single question is going to have all of the pieces of guidance, right? Maybe only you see Texas A&M University and DMP tool, or maybe you only see DMP tool. Comments on the rate are a place for you to chat with your collaborators. For example, if Atiana here at the libraries is helping you work on your data management plan, you all can use the comment feature to talk to each other. When you're done writing your plan, then you need to log all of your research outputs, and you can see the list here. For example, are you publishing a data paper afterward? Are you going to be publishing your data set, etc.? Are you going to be logging some software into GitHub? You go through that process to add the repository, what license you're going to use, and when you're going to do that, the details of which you can sort of see here, and those details are often required by the funder, as I mentioned before. You can now see immediately how this makes keeping your grants updated very simple. When it's time to update NSF on your project, they've already got the machine actionable data, which interfaces with the data repository to check that you followed up on your DMP. Before you finish, there's a button to request feedback, and this goes directly to Atiana here at the libraries. So now that you've heard from her, you know you can trust she's going to give you great feedback. Lastly, you finalize by publishing your plan, if required, submitting online, and or printing it to PDF to submit manually. But let me talk a little bit about public plans. Public plans are visible to anyone on dmptool.org. I do not recommend that you actually click to make your plan public unless you're using it as a teaching artifact or something. Registered plans, though, may be required. Registering your plan means you're going to get a DMP ID, which may actually be required by your grant. It's just going to be a string of digits. And then you can also assign it to your ORCID, which helps with machine actionability later. The final tab is the download tab, where you can choose format options before you download the PDF. Your grant, you may know, may require specific font sizes, margins, etc. And so if you need help creating a DMP, as I showed earlier, there is a guidance section within DMP Tool. You can use Ask Us at the Library, which will probably go right to Atiana. You can use the Funder Requirements tab in DMP Tool, which I didn't show, but it's right along the top. You can review some of those public plans. I have a note here. You saw how easy it is when you're done. You can just click public plan, even on something terrible. Just because someone else clicked make it public doesn't mean it's good. But however, DMP does mark some of the public plans as being recommended. So that's a great place to look for guidance as well.
Thank you, Diana. Howdy. I am going to cover how to select a data repository, how to create metadata and document your project data, and introduce you to the Texas Data Repository. Deposited data needs to be fair. Fair data ensures that data are findable so that others can discover your data, accessible so that your data is available to others, interoperable so that your data can be integrated with other data or machine readable, and reusable so that your data can be used for new research. Texas A&M University is a consortial member of the Texas Data Repository, and anyone affiliated with Texas A&M can deposit data in it if the data meets certain criteria. If your data does not meet these requirements, there are other data repositories you can choose from. Here is a list of registries that have listings of data repositories. Also keep in mind that you want your data to be as visible as possible, and if your research discipline has a go-to repository, it would be best to use that. Another consideration is that a granting agency or publisher may tell you to use a specific data repository. The Texas Data Repository is free for TAMU affiliates, but note that some repositories may have storage or hosting costs, and you will want to include these costs when writing grants. Most repository restrictions center around data file sizes and if the data contains sensitive information. Some repositories require depositors to have their data reviewed or curated before it can be posted online. So if you have a deadline to post your data, don't wait to the last minute. Also investigate that the repository you are selecting is legitimate. They may show accreditation or certification and will be hosted by academic institutions, professional societies, or government agencies. Now that you know how to find a data repository, let's talk about metadata, which you will be creating when you deposit your data to make it findable and accessible. Metadata is data about your data so that it can be understood by others. It includes basic information such as the title of your dataset file, the meaning of variables or abbreviations, how and when the data was collected, analyzed, or anything else that someone should know about if they want to reuse and understand your data. You are already creating metadata in your everyday life. Say that you take a selfie in front of Evan's library. In that case, your phone automatically creates metadata such as the GPS location, date, time, file size, file format, and information about the camera. This slide of cans with and without labels shows how metadata can be helpful to others. If we look at the can on the left, it has no label. We assume there's something in the can, but we don't know if it's food, paint, or glue. This is the equivalent of just handing somebody your data spreadsheet with no background information or metadata. In the middle photo, we can see the can's label has metadata that shows this is tomato soup, so we now know that it is an edible product. The label also includes metadata that shows the brand, food type, the food flavor, and size. But when you provide rich metadata, such as the label on the can on the right, there is information on the contents of the soup, so that now I can decide if I want to eat this can of soup or not. If I look closely at the amount of sodium, I will think I will opt out for a healthier version with low sodium. By providing detailed metadata, you help others decide if they want to use the data you shared. Additionally, if you want to reuse your own data in the future, you don't have to try to remember how your data was collected and organized if you have good metadata documentation. A major metadata field is keywords. Keywords should be the main topic or subject of your data. But remember that there are often many words for the same thing, and someone searching for COVID-19 may not find your data if you only have the keyword coronavirus. Some disciplines have their own controlled vocabulary. This is a step beyond keywords because controlled vocabulary means you are using a preferred term with a set meaning. An example of this from Biomed is the MESH vocabulary system used by the National Library of Medicine to index articles in PubMed. These standards set a common ground for people to further understand your data. If they know what you mean with your terms, then the data is more interoperable. When you deposit your data, you will need to provide project level and data level documentation so that others can understand how your data was created. Obviously, you are going to deposit your data, but you can also deposit materials that can help others use and understand your data. For example, the code you use to create or analyze the data, a data dictionary that goes into detail about what the data covers, a README text that provides an outline of who collected the data, methods and software used, and other information such as XML files. Do consider if you have sensitive data, you may need to de-identify it, or if you are working for a company, you may not have the rights to post the data. Also, some research communities have their own standards, and you will want to include those as well because someone from outside of your research community may want to use your data but is unfamiliar with your community standards. A README file contains information about the files and documents in your data set and are saved in a TXT format for easy accessibility. You can click on the README link to access a template of a README file so you can easily create your own. Use data formats that anyone can access easily without contacting you for help. Use open software rather than proprietary software so that other users don't have to purchase high-priced specialty software to read or use your data. Here we have a list of proprietary formats and their open equivalencies. We recommend posting your spreadsheets in CSV format instead of Excel. So here at Texas A&M, researchers have access to deposit data in the Texas Data Repository. The link is at the top. Understand that this is not a data storage space, but a publishing space for the data of a project. Your data will get a permanent identifier called a DOI. There will always be a page for that DOI link, and so your data will remain posted. You cannot unpublish your data. You can only give a new version of it. The Texas Data Repository, or TDR, is for smaller sized data projects and is a great fit for depositing data to meet an article requirement, thesis data, or to meet grant funding requirements. It can hold many types of data like spreadsheets and README files and allows for different versions of data. Note that the purpose of posting your data in the TDR is to make your data openly accessible to others, so you want to have nice clean files in your data set. This is not meant to store your data as you are analyzing it. This is where you want to post a final version of your data. Also note the file sizes. The largest file size is 4 gigabytes, but we recommend 2 gigabytes because of download issues over wireless connections. Also note that each data set must be under 25 gigabytes. Finally, the TDR does not have a mechanism to host confidential or sensitive data, so for that type of data or very large file sizes, you will need to select a different depository. One new feature we added is the ability to create a private URL to send to journal editors so that the data set is accessible to reviewers only for peer review while the data is still in draft form and not fully published. So far, I've covered what you need to think about when you are creating or collecting data so that you can easily make it available in a data repository. Here at the libraries, we can help you with preparing your data for deposit. We can recommend formats, metadata text, and licensing options. We also have workshops that cover how to manage your data so that it is easier to meet those FAIR principles and it's less work to deposit your data in the TDR. The benefits of depositing in the Texas Data Repository are version control that helps track progress and keep collaborators up to date. Published data sets are assigned a DOI or persistent identifier to allow citation. Flexible access controls let users decide when and with whom and how much data to share. Customizable metadata fields and permissions, and long-term preservation of uploaded data. Now, let's look at what the TDR can do for you once you deposit your data. This is just a simple data set with the corresponding files. Here you can see a researcher has posted some data about Texas bats. In the blue box, you can see there's a citation generator so the other people who use the data can cite this person and give them credit. On the right, you can see by the red arrow that this data has been downloaded 62 times. This shows impact of this researcher's work, that other people are interested in their data. Here's another way to use the TDR. This is data from a center here on campus. See how they have created 4 dataverses for their country data inside the overarching dataverse for their lab. A dataverse is a container for your data sets. Note to graduate students, before you leave Texas A&M University, to have access to your data once you leave at a later time, you will need to create a new user for your dataverse and use a Gmail email address. So first, you will need to create a new account in the Texas Data Repository with your Gmail address. Then once you have a Gmail account in the TDR, you will need it to then log in through your NetID login and go to your Dataverse or datasets and edit the permissions to add your Gmail address. Finally, decide what data you want or need to share. Select open formats. Document at the file and project level. The link at the bottom goes to the library's LibGuide for more help and information on data repositories.
Hello, my name is Jaden Matus, and I am a Research and Scholarly Initiatives Librarian here at TAMU. In this section, we'll be discussing 2 very important elements of data management which come near the end of your research process: publishing and impact. We'll explore how you can equip your data to reach its fullest potential while also helping to serve you as a researcher. So after you've collected your data and you've finished your research, you might find yourself wondering what your next steps should be. Questions like, how can I show the world all my hard work and my findings? Or how can my work be kept safe for the future? Those kinds of thoughts might be running through your head. After all, you just completed some really rigorous work, and you don't want it all to go to waste. So now you're ready to share your results and make them discoverable. So how can you help your data make a difference? We'll start by looking at data impact, what it is and what it means. Put simply, data impact is the influence and value that your data has and its effects on the greater research ecosystem. So this can be within your own field of study, it can be across disciplines, or even beyond academia. We can determine the impact of data by a few indicators. Data views, or how often is your data set being visited or viewed online. Downloads, or how frequently are other researchers downloading your data set. Data citations, or how is your data being used in others' research. Author citations, or who's mentioning your name in their research, or who's referring back to your work. And institution recognition. So if your affiliation with an institution like TAMU is recognized, then that can be a measure of impact. And there is more. This is not an exhaustive list. So at this point, you might be watching this and you're starting to think, well, how can I make an impact on my field with the data that I'm collecting in my research? The answer is publish it. Publishing your work is the most efficient way of getting it in front of other researchers and setting it up for the potential of recognition and reuse. You've worked really hard to collect and organize your data. You've probably spent months or even longer working on your research. So give it a proper introduction to the world. Think of publishing your data as a means of giving your data set a new life of its own. The possibilities for which your data could be impactful are endless when it's findable and it's usable. So why do we want you to start thinking about publishing that data that you've been collecting and working so hard on? Increasing your data's discoverability makes it easier for others to find your work. Reputable and appropriate repositories, like the ones that Atiana described earlier on, can index your items and assign them a persistent identifier, which is an essential element for discovering your work online. Publishing provides a show of academic transparency, meaning that sharing your data reinforces trust in your ethics as a researcher and your willingness to disseminate your findings. Publishing provides a home for your data and a place for you to preserve it for future researchers. Also, it's a place to return and update and curate the metadata should you need to. This is a big one. Your funder probably does require that you publish your work, so please make sure that you're always following all of your funder requirements. Your funder will likely also provide details as to the type of repository that you're expected to publish in, and also the type and format of the information that you need to share. So make sure you have a clear understanding of those requirements before you start the publishing process. And like I mentioned before, publishing affects your impact. No publishing leads to low impact. Your data has the potential to impact society far beyond your initial expectations. An obvious way your data can make a difference is by contributing to your field, by fueling further research, discoveries, advancements, and so on. I mean, this is what science is all about, right? Researchers working together and sharing with one another towards a greater good. But your data can reach far beyond your field, and it does have the potential to affect the entire world around us. We need good data to justify our reasonings for making change. One way data can influence change is by shaping a country's policies and laws. Another way is by reinventing or improving medical and clinical practices. Publishing your data can lead to an increased number of citations for you as an author, while also increasing your reach, meaning that other researchers in similar fields may see that you publish this really impactful data, right? And now they want to work with you on another project. And then before you know it, you're now collaborating with others, you're expanding your network, all because you made your research easy to access. Another important benefit of publishing is that it encourages the continuation of open science initiatives and emphasizes, again, that data is something to be shared, reworked, explored, and discovered by other researchers. Building off of that, sharing your data demonstrates your willingness to be a part of the bigger goal. It shows that you're transparent about having the results of your research out in the open and contributing to new developments. So what is FAIR data? Atiana sort of introduced us to the concept of FAIR in her part of the presentation, but let's take another quick look. So if we want to talk about making our data accessible, the best way to look at it is through the acronym FAIR. FAIR data is data that is findable, so it's easy to locate via a unique identifier or appropriate metadata. It's accessible, so data is stored properly and it's retrievable. It's interoperable, meaning that the data is machine readable, and it's reusable, or it's ready and able to be used by others. So anytime we're sharing our data, we should be cognizant of how it fits into this acronym. Think about these as you make your plans for deposit or publication. Am I providing enough detailed metadata, or am I making this easily shareable by the file type that I'm choosing? Data doesn't really mean much unless it's usable, right? So adhering to FAIR is what's going to ensure that you're doing your part to make that happen. So how does FAIR apply when we are looking to publish our work? So having a unique identifier assigned to your data makes it so your data can be cited, tracked, revisited, etc. So these are usually generated for you when you publish within a repository or a journal. Including rich metadata by describing your data clearly. How was it collected, what it contains, the unit, size, file format, so on and so forth. Again, always refer back to your funder requirements for this as well. Deposit your data in a trusted repository that ensures long-term access and compliance with publishing standards. So there's so many options out there. There's bound to be a perfect place for your data in a repository online. Make sure the metadata is accessible, even if your data is restricted, so others know that it exists and they can contact you, or they could at least see the information about the data. Like Diana mentioned, we know accessible isn't a synonym for free. We understand that not all data can be made publicly available for a variety of reasons. So in this instance, it's always ideal to at least have the metadata be discoverable. Most repositories will have standards for your submissions, so make sure you're following them and make life easy for both you and everyone involved. Also worth mentioning that you do not have to do any of this alone. So the library does have tools and resources and people who are so happy to help you with every step of this process. When you publish your work within repositories or journals that are open access, it means that your research outputs, be it articles or data, are freely available to anyone with an internet connection. Open access publishing removes so many barriers to research all over the globe. When possible, there are so many benefits to publishing going the open access route, and we at the libraries really do like to encourage researchers to consider doing so whenever possible. So why are we so eager to encourage open access publishing? The obvious answer is that it's the most accessible option. But moreover, it allows your data to reach a wider audience. So your data isn't limited to other researchers, right, who just so happen to hold a subscription to a journal you've published in, or it's hidden behind a paywall somewhere. You can reach more people, including those outside of academia, like teachers, journalists, policymakers. When it comes to increased citation numbers, all roads lead back to open access. Items published in open access locations have higher citation counts and are more likely to be referenced in other research, just because it's easier for others to get to your work. When you publish open access, you are supporting other researchers by increasing their ability to use your data and make change within their own communities. So like I mentioned, publishing open access puts fresh eyes on your work, and that could mean really big things for researchers from smaller institutions or those with less resources than you. By reaching the public, you're contributing to something bigger than yourself, and you're putting access first. Now, you might be thinking, oh, but I've always heard that the cost of publishing open access always falls on the researcher, and I do not want to spend thousands of dollars to have my research shared. Super valid concerns. We totally understand that. But with TAMU libraries, we are happy to share that we have options for waived or reduced article processing charges through partnerships with many journals, which I'll include later in this presentation. So please always check with your institution, see what opportunities are available for you to increase your open access publications. When it's time to choose where you'll want your data to live, consider the format. If you're publishing datasets, there are a few main types of repositories which you can publish in. Atiana has already explained the difference between some repositories, but let's just do a quick recap. So we have institutional repositories, like the Texas Data Repository. These are often hosted by your university library or a similar institution, And these are great for ensuring your requirements are met and great for ensuring compliance. There are specialist repositories, and these are disciplinary platforms like some examples are the National Science Digital Library, the Inter-University Consortium for Political and Social Research, so on. Think of these as repositories for your specialized field only. There's generalist repositories like Zenodo, Figshare, or the Open Science Framework, and these are really useful if your field lacks a dedicated repository. Also, like Atiana mentioned, you can always visit the Registry of Research Data Repositories or re3data.org to find the appropriate one for your data. And then if you're choosing to publish your data as a data article or a paper, there are many journals that you could choose from. There's Springer Nature, the Royal Society of Chemistry, Data in Brief, so on and so forth. So many journals accept data articles. Linked in this slide is the open access journals with waived APCs, like I mentioned previously, which you can view more to learn about TAMU's open access options. As a final note, please take time to go into your author profiles and make sure that they're updated or that you're registered. Having an updated scholarly profile will allow you to link your work back to one place, regardless of wherever it's published, and it can increase your visibility with other researchers. The first profile, and also probably the most widely used, is ORCID, which you can connect your NetID through institutional access. We also offer a profile just for faculty called Scholars at TAMU, which could serve as your TAMU point of contact for others. There's the Open Science Framework. That's another great way to help demonstrate your work, along with the ResearchGate. So there's options. And having an updated author profile is a really great way to increase your impact by expanding your reach and providing you with a network and a way to connect with other researchers. In this slide are resources for TAMU data management services, including guides, a link to our workshop calendar, and TAMU-related policies. These resources are really helpful in providing guidance when you're getting started and can help you understand more about data, the data lifecycle, using the data management tools that were discussed earlier by my colleagues. The following are resources to help you get started with the Texas Data Repository. Please see our user guide before you upload data to the TDR. We also have a video series on the steps on how to fill out the fields to deposit data in the Texas Data Repository. These are only like 5 to 10 minutes each. We also have a metadata dictionary, which goes into a lot of detail if you have questions about what type of information to put in the metadata fields. And included here are some resources for TAMU services and beyond, which can serve as a jumping off point for you when you're ready to start publishing or determining your impact. We offer guidance on all aspects of monitoring your impact, increasing your scholarly reputation, research data management. We also have a guide on getting started with ORCID, should you have any trouble getting that set up. And we've also included links to guides from various institutions which provide a super great overview of the data publishing process. Thank you so much for attending today. Remember, it's never too early to start thinking about publishing and what your data can do. Thank you. Please feel free to contact the library at any time for help or guiding you through any points of the data management process.